Well, the Prime Minister was on the call last night as European leaders, including Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, discussed the next steps in its war with Russia. As we played to you a moment ago, a statement issued said Anthony Albanese, he said Australia remains committed to supporting Ukraine, and it was an opportunity to discuss next steps in achieving a just and enduring peace. Let's get Liberal Senator Dave Sharma's reaction first of all to this. Good morning to you, Dave. So what do you say to that, the Prime Minister being involved in this call for whatever difference he can make on his own?
Well, look, I welcome Australia's involvement and the Prime Minister's involvement in this call. Obviously, there was a summit between President Putin and President Trump in Alaska on Friday. European leaders and Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, are travelling to Washington on Monday, Washington time, to discuss next steps. But I think it's too early, frankly, to assess the outcomes of that summit. Clearly, no ceasefire deal was reached, no land swap agreements were reached, which I think was important. But we need to really see how this plays out from here.
Just on that, I mean, Donald Trump, I mean, he's getting blasted by some sections of the media. It's more the progressive media over the United States for doing this and kind of sucking up to Vladimir Putin. But there does appear to be momentum in this space, is there not?
Well, look, there are talks happening and there's dialogue, and I think people ultimately know that that's how this war will need to be resolved. It will partly reflect battlefield conditions, but it will also partly reflect a diplomatic process. So I think that's positive. But look, the proof of the pudding here will be in the eating. You know, is Putin going to use diplomacy to get what he couldn't get on the battlefield, or will diplomacy allow Ukraine to be returned to a sovereign state that is no longer at war? And I think that's really how we'll need to assess the outcomes.
So do you think Zelensky is wise to take back up to the White House tomorrow, or does he run the risk of frustrating or even peeving Trump by being somewhat ambushed?
I don't think so. No, I think he's doing the right thing. And look, clearly he would not come unless he was invited, and President Trump spoke to President Zelensky before his meeting with Putin. It's natural enough that they should have a discussion afterwards. He's had a discussion with European leaders and Zelensky, but it's natural enough they should meet afterwards. But look, Putin has basically laid out his case to Trump, including what he calls the so-called root causes of the conflict. It's only fair and right that Zelensky and European leaders flag up some of the risks, frankly, of concluding a deal prematurely with Putin that does not provide for things like Ukraine's independence and sovereignty, security guarantees, potentially, things of that nature.
It looks as though Zelensky is going to have to give up land. Do you agree?
No, I don't agree. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but, I don't think Ukraine could give up sovereignty. Clearly parts of Ukrainian land have been occupied now since at least 2014.
Yeah.
Parts of Donetsk province, Luhansk province and Crimea as well. That doesn't mean Ukraine has given up its claim, but there can be times when you basically freeze a battlefield or freeze armistice lines, if you like, without renouncing claims to sovereignty. And I think that is potentially in the mix here.
All right, let's just close out on the economic roundtable that starts tomorrow. Danielle Wood, she's got something of a curtain raiser today, Dave. She's saying that, we've got these economic hairballs that are contributing to our lack of productivity here. She's cited a few things today, that there's going to have to be a carbon price, there's going to have to be cash flow levies, all in the mix when it comes to freeing up from the shackles of lower productivity. Have you got a pitch that you'd make if you were on the roundtable this week?
Well, look, I think the biggest issue that has not been sufficiently addressed is the growth in government spending. I mean, we've got government spending growing at 4 times the rate of the economy. We've got government spending as a share of the economy higher than it's been in 40 years. And we've got government spending that is not showing any discipline. I mean, 4 out of 5 jobs being created at the moment are in the non-market sector, basically fueled by public spending. So that is crowding out the private sector. Generally speaking, the private sector's productivity performance over the past 2 decades has not been bad, but the public sector's productivity performance has been completely flat. So if you're only growing the government sector of the economy, you're starving the private sector of both workers and capital, you're going to get a low productivity outcome. And I think that's the elephant in the room that really needs to be tackled.
All right, Dave, thank you so much for your time. We'll chat to you again next week.